quoting somebody else's comedy.
Hello, welcome to Common Censored. I'm Lee Camp, joined by Eleanor Goldfield. And today we're going to talk about it's a genocide somewhere. Is it Guam? What's the no.
Do you want to take a moment?
Yeah, there's a genocide somewhere. We'll figure it out in a moment. We'll be covering that. We have updates on many things that the mainstream media is not covering. Also, we will spend some time tearing apart this amazing back and forth with the State Department spokesman. Also, we'll be getting into Cop City, and we'll get into the connections between Cop City and what's going on in Israel-Palestine. Also, we will be going through the ways to debate, the ways to argue, all of the most common arguments about Israel-Palestine for the people that are supporting this genocide. So we will go through those arguments as well. A lot of fascinating stuff. Are you excited? I'm excited.
I'm super, super excited.
She's super, super excited. She says it with her eyes, not as much with the tone, but...
Look, you get me how you get me. All right.
I totally know that. That's what I love about you. So, hello everybody. Please click thumbs up, click share, throw a comment in there. All that good stuff helps get the show out there. But let's get started. Actually, I want to do, before we show that, we're going to start off with the State Department spokesman in just a second. But before we do that, I just wanted to throw in some news on the breaking news front. Israel has agreed to a daily humanitarian corridor for a few hours every day to escape the genocide they're perpetrating, which I don't think humanitarian enters into any of it. Like if you're in an eating competition and you stop for 30 seconds, it's not called skinny time. It's still...
Oddly enough, a lot of people who do those professional eating contests are skinny, but that's not the point here.
Can you not hyperanalyze and ruin my jokes?
I'm sorry. I find that interesting.
Just don't just let it. Yeah.
It really flies in the face of the concept of, calories and it doesn't matter. But so also humanitarian corridor is an interesting euphemism because what originally the Biden administration was saying that they were asking Netanyahu for a humanitarian pause. Now, humanitarian corridor is even more vague.
Tinier.
Well, it's
shrunken
tinier
down.
And it's vague because it's like a corridor is a thing, not a period of time. They're saying it's going to be 4 hours.
It's like trying to get into a wormhole where they're like the wormhole opens for 30 seconds every 15 years. It's kind of that.
Well, and it's like a corridor, but like to where and how are you supposed to get there in south. 4 hours?
You're just south.
But my point being, like, how are you supposed to move through places that are absolutely destroyed? Right. How are you supposed to move?
And there's
on
some
foot. When you're injured, when you haven't eaten, when you're drinking poisoned water. It's like all of these things it doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Yeah.
So the corridor is bullshit, both euphemistically and realistically. It doesn't make any sense. And yet again, I just recently talked about this on a Project Censored show that y'all can check out at projectcensored.org. It allows, in particular, the likes of Biden, who knows that a lot of people that have been in the streets recently demanding a ceasefire voted for him, and next year is an election year. And so he like his administration wants to be able to say, we did something. So this is what they are able to say. And I know that sounds super cynical, that Biden is more interested in his election than the genocide, but he is.
But here's another reason they're doing it is...
Hold on one second. So basically, this is classic Democrat. I just have to finish this thought, or otherwise I'll never say it, and I want to say it. So this is classic Democrat, right? The ability to do jack shit and yet say that you did something. So a humanitarian corridor, a humanitarian pause, whatever the shit is that they're saying, they get to say, oh, we did this. So mark my words, this is going to come up later. Oh, well, voters say that you didn't do anything about the genocide. Oh, well, humanitarian corridor. Mark my words, that will show up. And it is classic Democrat. Now you can go ahead. I'm sorry.
But here's the real reason they're doing it is because, I mean, yes, you're right that Biden loves the thing he can hold up and say, look what I did. But the real reason is this actually shows Israel's hand. This shows what the whole reason is that they're doing this. They want to get everyone out of North Gaza so that they can own Gaza. They want everyone, and it also reveals why they're bombing innocent civilians. You could go after Hamas without bombing innocent civilians, but if you don't bomb the innocent civilians, then everybody doesn't leave, and they want everybody to leave. So they are trying to purge the whole area of Palestinians, which is genocide, it's forced migration, it's every type of war crime. But it is revealing, actually, of what this is what Israel's been talking about doing for years and years. This didn't start October 7th. Getting all of the Gazans to go south. They want them to go to Israel and live in tent cities in the Sinai desert. But so far, Egypt's saying no. But so now they've bombed so thoroughly and killed so many thousands of innocent people that hundreds of thousands are fleeing south. And Israel's like, here's the opening for you to flee south. So,
and I don't know if folks have seen it. I don't have the image on hand at the moment, but there were images of Israeli forces holding an Israeli flag on the beach, on beaches of Gaza, saying like, we did it, we got this. And so if it were about defeating Hamas, if it were about freeing hostages and going after people, would you see a bunch of soldiers celebrating on a beach that they got the land?
right.
No, because it's not about Hamas. It's not about ensuring that their citizens are safe. It is about, and always has been, about settler colonialism. So yeah, this whole thing, and I saw somebody in the chat say that this has people have made connections to the Trail of Tears. Yeah, settler colonialism shares tactics throughout time and throughout geography. So absolutely, these are the same tactics that have been used in all settler colonial projects. So absolutely.
You guys are making great points in the chat. Amin Ali says it's all about oil, gas, and a canal to compete with the Suez. And there is a lot of people talking about the gas reserves that were found off of Gaza in Palestinian waters around the year 2000. They have not been tapped yet because Israel won't really allow it. And at first it was, now the Palestinians will have some income so that they can get out of such severe poverty. But of course, Israel doesn't want that. They don't want them selling their oil. So yes, there is definitely an incentive for Israel to own this area and take that oil. Now, I believe that there are deeper reasons than just oil, as with U.S. occupation of Syria. U.S. still occupies 10%, I believe it is, of Syria, and the U.S. is stealing oil from that area, but that's not the deeper reason of why the U.S. has nearly collapsed Syria. It goes back to the petrodollar and owning the world, and really, which Israel's a big part of. Israel's part of the U.S. empire. To get back to something else that you said, Eleanor, is on top of just the voters, the U.S. empire does a little bit, very little, worry about what the view of the U.S. is around the world, because if it gets to the point that the U.S. is so hated around the world, then there is enough of a force that it can actually be really detrimental to hegemony and really difficult to continue to own the world. And so this is actually coming from CNN, that internally the Biden administration privately warned by American diplomats of a growing fury against the U.S. in the Arab world, so much to the level that they're saying we are losing badly in the messaging. A wide range of trusted and sober-minded contacts are saying that that what's going on in Gaza, the genocide against Gaza, is losing the Arab public for a generation. The Arab world is massive. And if you lose and I know many of you are thinking, well, the Arab world doesn't like the U.S. to begin with. Yeah, but as with the U.S., there are many uninformed people around the world, or lightly informed, I guess, light information people. And so they may not love the U.S., but they're not like, damn, U.S. is creating a genocide, and it is causing a fury, which is very different than perhaps a slight dislike of the United States. So there's another reason that they Eleanor, you also mentioned this is not about Hamas and they're, bombing everywhere. And this also undermines the narrative of this all being about October 7th. The Israeli government has now admitted that the majority killed in the October 7th operation were Israeli soldiers. Over 50% of those killed were Israeli soldiers. If you then add in Israeli soldier reserves, which is most people, of military age or even up to a certain age, then you're talking even higher, probably more like 75%.
How many were killed by Israel?
And then you got to add in there, which Israel will never admit, but then you got to add in there the amount killed by the IDF, which is a huge amount. And I've done a lot of coverage of that aspect of it. But anyway, I want to get to, unless you had anything else.
I've got lots.
I don't
know where you're going.
We have lots coming up. I want to get to the State Department video, which you found. Thank you for that. But I brought you a State Department video. Was it yesterday's live stream, the one before, of Sam Husseini questioning the State Department spokesman. This is another one. This poor spokesman gets nailed by Sam Husseini every day, it seems.
As he should.
He should.
I feel no, what's the word? Empathy for the State Department dude.
So we're gonna go through this and pick it apart as we go. And it is so fun. And if it weren't about a genocide, it would be just a riot. Just a riot.
First off, there was breaking news about a Red Cross truck being hit, apparently by Israel. Do you have knowledge?
I don't get notifications of that stuff when I'm up here, Sam, but I'm happy to check.
Several hours ago.
I don't have any specific.
He tried to be snarky and say, I don't get notifications while I'm up here. It happened 20 hours ago. They bombed a Red Cross convoy in Gaza. And as Israel says, they know where every bomb and every bullet lands.
Specific updates on that specific report.
You accept Israel's premise that it is actually targeting Hamas and not the civilian population of the Palestinians, in spite of all of this evidence?
We do. We accept the premise that Israel is undertaking a military operation to degrade Hamas, to target Hamas, and to do everything it can to hold Hamas accountable for its
just targeting Hamas. And here's the thing, as the U.S. says that, as this dopey spokesperson says, we take them at their word that they're only targeting Hamas, you're either breathtakingly ignorant, or you're lying. Those are the only two options.
He's lying.
No, I know, but I'm just saying.
Well, no, I'm saying
those are the only two options.
That is my, because here's the thing. In the United States government, there might be 4 people out of the thousands, that are that stupid. Maybe 4.
Yeah.
And one of them, Sarah Palin. So, I mean, the other 3, I don't know. Those, that's it. There are only 4 people that are that goddamn stupid.
I agree.
Terrorist attacks on the Israeli people on October 7th.
The reports are of over 10,000 civilians and over 4,000 children.
Sam,
how
I'm
many
not
Hamas?
disputing.
How many Hamas dead have they got?
Sam, I'm not.
How many? I'm going to let him answer.
Okay.
How many Hamas dead have they got? Yeah, there's a good question. I'm sure he'll have the answer to that, right?
Disputing that there has been an immense impact on civilians over the course of this operation, that there has been an immense number of civilian casualties over the course of this operation. We have been.
There's the passive voice. There have been an immense number of casualties.
Very direct with our Israeli partners about the fact that there is an imperative to target Hamas terrorists and not civilians. And we will continue to raise that. And we have made so very clearly that we believe that there are additional steps that can be taken to minimize the impact on civilians.
Would you like to go?
No, I want him to keep talking.
You want to listen to all 5 minutes at once?
Well, I have nothing to say here because it's obviously so dumb.
Well,
but your question was, do I take issue with their stated intent of targeting and undertaking Hamas? I do not.
No. I wasn't asking that at all. I was saying, do you accept at face value,
we have-
in spite of all of the evidence.
We have no reason to not accept that Israel is undertaking an operation with a stated intent of targeting Hamas.
Of course, you have all the reason in the world to question whether they're actually doing that. Of course you do. 4,000 children. How do you accidentally kill 4,000 children? Oh, some days over 400 kids killed in a day. They're warning hospitals. They're saying, hey, on the phone, get out of there. You have
We're
1
going
hour
to bomb.
to leave. We're going to bomb you. And then they bomb it.
Well, so like, and a few days ago, or yes, I don't even fucking know what day it is, but they quite literally bombed a children's cancer ward of a hospital.
Yeah.
Riddle me this. How many Hamas were in there? It is absolutely, it is so just unbelievably, terroristically absurd to say what this piece of shit is saying. I mean, like, this guy, I don't actually understand how this guy can be up there, like, spewing these. And I have to say, I have to just hand it to Sam Husseini, because if that were me in that chair, I would have already rushed that podium and been beating the shit out of this guy with my shoe. So I have to say, like, Sam Husseini, oh,
No,
bless you for your ability to sit in that
Yeah,
chair the
yeah.
entire time that he's talking to you.
Surrender now!
Seriously, because I would not be able to do it. I
No.
wouldn't.
No, and I often think, like, if I got that chance to actually ask this guy a question, the problem is, yeah, I mean, I think I'd be pretty good at tearing apart their lies, but I wouldn't be good at not just going, you're a psychopath.
Yeah.
You're murdering children. Like, I wouldn't be good at that. So I can't, the casual, and it's not just Sam Husseini. There's like one or two other guys who will sit there and be like, do you find it fascinating that you
Right.
accuse China of creating a genocide when you've never accused them of killing anybody? And yet here, Israel has murdered over 11,000 people in a month, and innocent people, and you don't call that a genocide. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do that.
No.
Let's see.
Hamas
that's
and
their
degrading
stated intent.
Hamas.
I know that's their stated intent. I'm just saying that the evidence of hospital after hospital and school after school undermines that, wouldn't you say?
Sam, we have been, it's not the first time you've heard me say this. We have been very vocal about the fact that steps need to be taken
No, you
to
haven't.
minimize the impact on civilians.
But even if they had been very vocal, those are just words. They could end this in a second. They could call Netanyahu and say, this is over, and it would be over.
Yes.
Because Israel can't exist without
U.S. backing.
without U.S. backing. Cannot exist.
We recognize that there has continued to be an increasing impact on civilians over the course of this operation. And
Yeah, I'd call it an impact. Many of them have been impacted directly by a bomb. It's not just an impact, it's murder.
continue to be very direct with our Israeli partners that this operation needs to and should be conducted in accordance with international law, and that there is a strategic and moral imperative to do so.
They've literally broken, what was it, 62 international law? Like, they've committed 62 war crimes, like, just since October 7th.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, this goes back to the humanitarian corridor, or the fucking whatever they're calling it. If you wanted Israel to stop, you could get them to stop. But this allows you to put up some kind of check mark, like, I did the thing. We got Israel to acquiesce to a humanitarian corridor, which means nothing. It's genocide. It's kind of like how the Nazis, when they put Jews in the gas chambers, sometimes they didn't use poison gas. That's a humanitarian corridor. That's Nazis saying, "Oh, we didn't use the gas that time." That's exactly what Israel is doing. Oh, you get 4 hours. Here you go. We're not using poison gas this time. So it's like, it's absolutely meaningless. It's still a genocide. And so again, like, this allows the State Department, this penis wrinkle, and all of his fellow his colleagues to say, we did the thing, and we're telling Israel that they have to do this, and that they need to do this, and it's imperative to do this, and da-da-da-da. It means nothing. Absolutely nothing. You could pull the plug in a second if you wanted to, but you don't.
Yeah. They don't at all. The blood is on all of their hands, as well as Netanyahu's, as well as the IDF. It's absolutely on Biden. Of course, it's on all the Republicans voting for this crap as well. So it's not just Democrats. And hopefully it's getting some people to understand that the Democrats and Republicans are the same, because yet again, you have a issue, although it's rare to see them vote 97-0, but here, this is an issue where they all agree. Let's send more missiles, more bombs, more munitions to a genocide. There are, and as I've covered in past live streams, there are boots on the ground, special forces in Israel advising them. The Pentagon has confirmed that they are piloting drones over top of Gaza, giving intelligence to Israel. So the U.S. Army is acting as an arm of the Israeli army.
But that does not change the fact that Hamas also is an entity that continues to use Palestinian civilians as human shields, that has integrated and co-located itself with schools, hospitals, and other critical civilian infrastructure.
Human shields, I've debunked that multiple times. It's a racist, ridiculous bullshit trope. And then the whole co-located, which I feel like that's on New Talking Point. They've co-located themselves. Any society, especially one as tiny as Gaza, 5 miles wide, 25 miles long, any government, Hamas is the government. It's not just the army, it's the government. Any government is going to have buildings throughout the society in a tiny land area like that. So the idea that it's like, oh, well, the Hamas, well, yeah, Hamas is also, the Gazan healthcare system, or the Gazan trash pickup is also Hamas. It's the government. Anyway, and on top of that, of course, if anyone bombed a hospital because it was next to an Israeli government building, I think there'd probably be an uproar. I think people wouldn't be like, it's fine, it's next to a government building.
Hamas is a group, and it's a terrorist organization that is bent on hijacking the political future of Palestinian civilians. And there is a clear track record of that.
I sent our exchange.
Hijacking the political future. It's just such garbage. But anyway.
From Monday around to a series of international lawyers. I don't know if you're familiar with Richard Falk. He's a very prominent international lawyer, taught at Princeton for years, was the UN rapporteur. He emailed back to me, Gaza remains, from the perspective of international law and the UN, an occupied Palestine territory subject to the Fourth Geneva Convention. I don't believe that Israel recognizes the Fourth Geneva Convention for all of these decades. I don't know what US policy is on that question. So that's one question. This means that Israel is an occupying power and has a primary obligation to safeguard the safety of the civilian population. It is entitled to take reasonable, lawful measures to restore its security in the aftermath of such an attack, referring to October 7th. As such, it has no international legal right of self-defense. Even if it had such a right of self-defense, it would have no legal or moral basis for engaging in a genocidal assault, the character of which has been strongly confirmed by Israel's top leaders.
And we talked about that as well. The a week ago, that the definition of genocide absolutely applies in this situation. And in fact, Israel's leaders have said that their goal is to absolutely wipe Gaza off the map. And that's genocide. Like, you could call it whatever you want. If that word makes you uncomfortable, good, but you could also call it Steve. I don't really care. It is what it is. And absolutely,
no offense to Steve's out there,
I just use Steve for everything. So if I ever meet a Steve, maybe that's why, because I don't know a Steve. So it's a nice placeholder. Sorry for Steve.
If many Steves out there, you can defend yourself in the chat.
So yeah.
No, yeah, but of course, that international lawyer is making great points that the U.S. can't answer to, Israel can't answer to.
Does the U.S. recognize the Geneva Conventions as applying to Palestinian territories?
Sam, what I'm just going to say is what you've heard us say before, is that we believe
this is a rhetorical trick. In order to not answer the question, you repeat the guy's name, and then you put a bunch between the question and your response so that people start to forget that you haven't answered the question. Sam, you know, I really got to tell you that as things go through this day, it's been a bit of a rainy day out there, you got to say. And, you know, when I was putting on my shoes this morning, I thought I'd get mud on them. Okay. So here we are. We're in this room. And by that point, no one remembers what the question was. So it's just a trick.
In that, I'm
Well,
asking a
that's
specific question.
that's the answer that I have for you, which is that we believe wholeheartedly that Israel has every right to defend itself and to defend its security. And what happened on October
Against child cancer patients.
7th would be unacceptable to any country, and steps must
We're
and
not
should be
talking
taken.
about another country. We're not
Steps
talking
must
about
and should be taken to ensure that those events cannot be repeated. Now, I've taken
But
3 of your
we're not
questions.
talking-
I also this guy looks so incompetent and so dopey up there. It feels like the U.S. government has given up on their propaganda. They're just like, well, let's just put the dopiest guy we can find up there, and maybe people will feel bad for him trying to push this pro-genocide narrative. Because he doesn't look confident. He doesn't look highly intelligent on the matters. They're just like, but it's just a sacrificial lamb. Just maybe people will feel bad for him.
I don't think he looks. I mean, he looks dopey, but I certainly don't feel sorry for him.
No, I think maybe that's just a goal. I'm not
Right.
saying I do. I don't feel bad for him at all. I think that you made a choice to be a part of a genocidal administration. So there you are. All right, shall we move on to it's called 8 Common Zionist Talking Points and How to Respond. And we're not going to go through this argument again, but just to reiterate out there, everyone, Zionist does not equal Jew. In fact, there are more Zionists
who are not Jewish.
who are not Jewish than there are Jews in the world. And there are many anti-Zionist Jews, like the 2 you're watching right now. So when you hear the word Zionist, do not think Jewish people, and don't use the word Zionist to mean Jewish people.
So again, there's a lot you can read here, and y'all watching can see the Instagram account for those listening. It is at RAADBARHOUSH. That's the Instagram user's account. And basically, I thought it was a really nice and more succinct way to deal with a lot of the questions, either questions that come up in a legitimate conversation or questions you get from trolls. And so they're also split up into ones that pertain to recent events specifically, and ones that pertain to the cause of Palestinian freedom in general. So the first one is Israel has the right to defend itself after the Hamas attacks of October 7th. So Sam Husseini already brought this up. As an occupying force, you don't have a right to defend yourself, not legally and also not morally. But you don't have to start with that. Although he does. Basically, the idea that he also brings up in this post is, what does it mean to defend oneself? We have a Department of Defense in this country. We haven't defended ourselves against shit since the advent of this country, right? We are an offensive force.
Right.
The empire is an offensive force. Israel is an offensive force. It is an occupying force. It exports violence, right? So there is no defense that we're talking about here. When you come in and you steal people's land, there is no defense in that. That is not a defensive action. So in and of itself, that makes no sense. So again, like in this argument, what does it mean to defend?
Well, and I think he kind of makes this point, but so they go, well, October 7th, they're responding to October 7th. Well, October 7th was, and you don't have to agree with every action of Hamas. I don't agree with much of what they did on October 7th. I don't agree with murdering innocent civilians, whether that was, as many as the Israelis say or not. But you don't have to agree with everything Hamas does to agree that what led to October 7th was decades of abuse and persecution, and keeping them in open air prison still means prison. So keeping them in a prison. And let's remember, Israel had 5,000 hostages, Palestinians in other prisons. Israel had 5,000 hostages before October 7th, 5,000 sitting in actual cells, not just open air prison. And so it was just endless abuse. And I've heard, I haven't verified this, I heard 85% of Hamas fighters are those who lost their entire families or large segments of their families to bombing. So these are people who had their families murdered and then moved to being Hamas fighters, many of them.
Right. And
so
I think
that's the lead up to, you can't, October 7th didn't happen out of a vacuum.
Right, of course. And also, just the idea of defending yourself. What does that mean when you're cutting off food and water and bombing cancer patients? Like, that is not a defense for anything. I don't care what's happened. But again, when you contextualize Hamas and the ongoing occupation and oppression of the Palestinian people, it makes even less sense. The second point that he brings up is, quote, why would Hamas attack Israel knowing the consequences of their actions? So he brings up the PLO accepted all U.S. and Israeli conditions for peace and signed the Oslo Peace Accord in 1993 in return for an end to Israeli occupation. 30 years passed and the Palestinians regained nothing. On the contrary, Israel occupied more land, built more settlements, increased military presence, and violated holy sites. He also brings up the Great March of Return, which was a way to, again, peacefully, literally have tried everything, peacefully marching, a lot of elders holding the keys to their homes that were destroyed or that they were thrown out of during the Nakba in 1948. So this way of fighting back, of peacefully showing up for protests, BDS, et cetera, appealing to the global community, tried all of it. Nothing helped. Nothing's happened.
And in fact, they were murdered during the Great March of Return. Right. Thousands were shot, 200 some were killed. And these are unarmed, innocent people walking towards a fence that is illegal under international law.
Right. So with all of this, the question then becomes, are we surprised that Hamas didn't do this sooner, actually? Because if you look at the history of this, the history of the oppression and the violence, I'm actually surprised that this has not happened sooner. And again, this is not about whether I think that I enjoy seeing civilians, regardless of what passport they have or what flag they fly. Do I enjoy seeing them die? No, I don't. Again, this has to do with contextualizing the situation so we understand where this is coming from. Would I enjoy seeing a bunch of people murdered by indigenous peoples in here or in South America or wherever? No, I would enjoy watching it. But if you understand the context of what's happening, then you understand the actions that took place. And so it's kind of like we've tried everything. What are we going to do? Because you can't break people's desire for freedom. That is just something that will never happen, which is why we see what's happening now, because the only way that Israel sees to shut this down is to kill absolutely all of them. The next point that he brings up is, quote, Israel completely withdrew from Gaza, therefore it's not occupied. I actually don't know who the hell says this, because I would just love to know.
I don't think I've heard that one.
What? Where is that talking point?
Yeah.
So the point that I guess he's pulling from a comment that Israel just withdrew Israeli settlers from Gaza in 2005. But of course, as we know, as we've said many times, Gaza is known as the largest open air prison in the world, and therefore the idea that Israel has withdrawn from it is laughable. It's like saying that the cops have withdrawn from the prisons. It's like, what?
Right. The cop's not in your prison cell, so you're free. So you're free in your prison cell. But on top of the fact that they have them imprisoned, so they can't leave. Yes, some Gazans get a pass to leave, but it's pretty rare. But they also control their water, they control their supplies, they control their internet connection, they control their food. They literally back in 2007 said they were putting the Palestinians, quote unquote, on a diet and decreased the amount of calories to under the amount that they thought was a livable level of calories allowed into the Gaza area. So it's, of course it's occupied.
The next point that he brings up is, why did Hamas kidnap more than 200 innocent Israeli civilians? Now, again, Lee, this is something that you've brought up, the fact that there are 1,200, there are thousands actually of detainees, of prisoners, of Palestinian prisoners, and he brings up that 1,200 of them, it's probably more.
Yeah, these are old numbers. Yeah.
Are administrative detainees, so called, which means they're held indefinitely with no trial or charge. This is kidnapping and also illegal under international law, but hey,
Right.
Who's keeping track?
Right. And then he says that Israel has kidnapped 1,500 more since October 7th, but that actually is now over 5,000.
Right. And so what he points out here is that we may assume that Hamas took Israelis as prisoners to exchange them, but also this is again, this is like this whataboutism. It's like, well, what about the Israeli civilian prisoners? I agree, it's awful. Are we also talking about how awful it is that there are thousands, including children, Palestinians that are kept in Israeli prisons? Are we also talking about that? Because if we're not, then we can't actually have a conversation about this.
Right. And how much of this was in the news? You're hearing a lot about the hostages Hamas has right now, right? You hear about it all the time. You hear it on the news. You see their faces often. People are putting up posters of them. How much did you hear about the hostages Israel had before October 7th? How much did you hear CNN talk about it? How much did you see a poster of the 5,000 people that were locked up in Israeli jails without given access to a trial or charges? And then even if they are given a trial, it's an Israeli judge saying guilty because you're Palestinian. So how much did you hear about them? Zero. Ever. So there's a difference.
Right. So now on to the talking points about the larger issue in general. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a complex issue that's hard to understand and even harder to solve. This is one that has been, I mean, this is propaganda that's been happening since day one.
It's complex.
Right.
Eleanor, why are we talking about it when it's so complex?
This is, interestingly enough, you see this happen with pretty much every issue, including climate change. You'll see them up there like, well, look, I'm not a scientist, so I don't really understand. And it's like, no, you're not. You're an idiot. And you should listen to the scientists because they all agree. Just like with this issue. Actually, it's not complex. And all the people who are experts on the issue, the UN, human rights organizations, they're all very clear on this. Israel is a settler colonial state, and this is very clear cut. It's illegal according to international law. It's human rights violations daily. There's really no complexity here. The only thing that's complex is how it's fed to us and how it's fed to us via propaganda. And a lot of this,
it's used to shut down debate, is to say it's complex.
A lot of this has to do with the next point, which is Jewish people have existed in the land long before Palestinians, making them its rightful owners. So two things here. Not long before, in conjunction with. So that's the other thing. Yes, there are Jewish people, they're oftentimes referred to as Mizrahi Jews, who have been in that area, that land. And interestingly enough, they were typically called Sephardic Jews before the advent of Israel, that have existed on the land that is now called Israel for thousands of years. Absolutely. You know what? They lived in Palestine. Palestine, being the unfortunate homeland of three different religions, has had people that are Christian, Muslim, and Jews. And let's not forget, there are a lot of Palestinian Christians as well. We all just kind of assume that they're all these evil Muslims, right? But these three religious groups have existed in what is now occupied Palestine for thousands of years. Absolutely. And they coexisted a lot. And there have been waves of migration of Jews, particularly like in the late 1800s, fleeing the pogroms in Europe. And then a lot who didn't migrate there because they didn't want to or they couldn't. And guess what?
There was another time they had to get on a big boat because everything flooded. Things have been weird.
So I thought that was just giraffes. So this idea that they are the rightful owners of the land is ridiculous. And let's just say, again, I recommend that people read Shlomo Sand's Invention of the Jewish People, which really talks about how a lot of the Jews that we know of today are actually not tied indigenously to the land of Palestine, but are converts that happen after the Roman invasion of Israel back in the day. But that's a different story. So let's just say hypothetically that we're all indigenous to Palestine. Okay. Does that mean that you get to then genocide another indigenous population that is also indigenous to that land? No, it doesn't.
Well, and going back, it's nonsense. Anytime someone tries to go back several hundred years to claim some area of the world, you should just tell them that it's an idiot's argument, because we've all interconnected since then, intermarried, bred, and so it's just a dumb argument. I believe it was Bill Bryson. He said if someone in the United States tells you they're descended from someone on the Mayflower, which was what, 1600s, 1600s, then you should instantly say me too, because at this point, after 400, 500 years, we're all connected to people back that far. It's just too long, and there's been too many generations. So really, it's okay to talk about who was living there, but I wouldn't go back more than like 100 years, 200 years, maybe. But when Israel was founded in 1948, it was 4% Jewish, right? Wasn't it?
I don't know specifically.
I had seen that before the 1940s, it was 4% Jewish.
Well, and again, this goes to show that yes, there have been Jews living in that land. They're just not my ancestors. I don't think they're your ancestors either. My Jewish ancestors are Ashkenazi, and I believe my dad was able to trace some of his family back to southern Spain right around the time of the Inquisition, which would also make them Sephardic Jews. So, but again, it's like, and I don't necessarily know about the 100, 200 years thing. I think it more has to do with, can we legitimately say that any people has the right to commit genocide because they claim that it's their land?
Only a couple of people I know do I be like, you can commit genocide.
But then on top of that, there is no actual legitimate claim to that land from the predominantly Ashkenazi, as in like has no ancestral ties to this land. And lest we forget, Israel is a white supremacist settler colonial state. So even when we're talking about other Jews who are not white, Israel is horrific to them. They have, for instance, forcibly sterilized Ethiopian Jews, but they're Ethiopian, right? So they're black. So they're not wanted by the state of Israel.
Can you not yell Jews? It does terrible things to our algorithm.
So can I?
Yeah, you can whisper. Yeah. By the way, folks, Ashkenazi is different than Ashkenazi, which is what the Israeli government does for their policies.
Oh my God, I never realized how close
that's where they get their policies.
That's really creepy. Okay. So yes, and then this point is that the next point is that Jewish people deserve their own safe homeland in direct response to the Holocaust. Now, a lot of people make this argument, and this is one in particular that gets difficult with Jewish families. But there are so many histories, unfortunately, of genocide and oppression of many people, Jews being one of them. We all deserve a safe homeland, but that homeland cannot be at the expense of other people's genocide. And in reality, Jews, just like everyone else, should be at home wherever they want to be at home. Again, not at the expense of anybody else. So I have the right as a Jewish person to feel safe in the United States as a human being, right? And so this makes no sense. Yes, we deserve to feel safe after the Holocaust, but the other thing is you can't find safety in the genocide of others. There's no such thing. You make everybody less safe by committing genocide. So finally here, Israel has consistently made generous peace offers, which were rejected by the Palestinians. That is just the biggest load of bullshit I've heard in a long time. It's totally not true. So, and there is like so much written about this. Again, I'm not going to read all of these slides. Y'all can check it out on your own, but that is just bullshit. And
well, and they would also, as you mentioned, the Oslo agreement earlier, and they would make these agreements and then just totally ignore them. So, yeah, it's insane.
Which is what settler colonialists do, right? You see that in the United States, where
we have stuck by every deal we've ever made.
Where like,
what are you
every time there's a pipeline or every time there's a mining project, the indigenous people come with like the Treaty of 18 so-and-so says you can't do this, and the U.S. government is like, yeah, we don't give a shit. That's just not a thing.
Or something we signed like 5 years ago says you can't, and it's like, oh no, we don't care anymore. Like the Minsk agreements between Ukraine and Russia, and they've now admitted, Zelensky and others, and Germany admitted that they signed those because they never intended to keep to them. They just wanted to buy time to arm Ukraine more heavily. So they signed them and never intended to keep to them, which same as U.S. signing stuff with the Native Americans. We are going to keep this show rolling. We have a lot more good stuff for you, including updates on Cop City in Atlanta, the fight against Cop City, as well as the connections between Cop City and Israel's IDF and brutal genocide that's being perpetrated. All of that is coming up now, but it will only be at rumble.com/Lee Camp and my locals page, leecamp.net. Those of you locals obviously can keep watching as well. And actually, before we cut off the other streams, let's present this awesome shirt you have created.
Yeah, so I it's not like anything really beautiful, but the concept is. So hopefully y'all will do me the honor of sharing it, even if you don't plan on buying one. It's a shirt that says Jewish as in Free Palestine. It for those listening, it includes a Star of David and the Palestinian flag. So not the Israeli flag, not that Star of David, like the actual Star of David, because that Star of David does not belong to Israel. F them. It's our star. Thank you. So it's a shirt that I'm selling, and all of the proceeds from the sale of the shirt will go to the Palestinian. I can't remember the name here. The Palestinian Medical Relief Society, which is a grassroots medical organization on the ground in Palestine that's been doing remarkable and unfortunately horrifying work even before October 7th. Of course, as we've noted, the work of trying to get people healthcare in Gaza has been incredibly difficult since roughly 1948. So Palestinian Medical Relief Society will get all of the proceeds. So if you are, or if you know a rad Jew, please do share this with them, because again, all of the profit will go to that organization, that grassroots
organization. And
organization.
the way to get it is to find Eleanor's Gumroad account, which I've put the link into the description here. But for those listening to the podcast, is there a way to tell them?
Yes, I posted it on my website, artkillingapathy.com. It's also up on my Instagram at Radical Eleanor and my Twitter at Radical Eleanor.
Okay, we are going to rumble.com/Lee Camp. We've got at least 15 more minutes of content for you. Rumble.com/Lee Camp, as well as the locals page. For the rest of you, I hope you make it over there. Rumble's free, so join us over there, completely free. And I hope you come over with us. If you can't, then I hope you still will consider becoming a member at leecamp.net. Check it out. Give it a try. You can also become a free member. You just won't get everything if you choose not to pay the $6. All right. For those of you at the other streams, we bid you farewell. If you would like to start introducing the Cop City story.